So let's say you're on T-Mobile, you're looking for a mid-range Android smartphone, and you've landed at two devices, the myTouch Q and the myTouch. They're very similar in many ways, but there's also a couple of differences, and you're trying to decide which one you should get. Well, if that's the case, this dogfight should help you, because we're going to compare both of these phones and see which one is better, see which one you should go for. Now, there's some obvious differences between the two, like, for example, the myTouch Q has a physical keyboard, whereas the myTouch doesn't. But there's also a couple of subtle differences, and we're going to talk about those as well in the dogfight. Before we start with this dogfight, I have to say a shout out to our friends at Best Buy Mobile. We thank them all the time because they send us the phones that we add to our One Paw Bandit game, and that's the game where you guys can win free phones. One of the great things about Best Buy Mobile is that when you buy a phone from them, you don't have to worry about rebates. You don't have to worry about sending it in, waiting for the rebate card or the rebate debit card. The price on the tag is the price you pay. So thank you, Best Buy Mobile, for being so awesome. Thank you guys for watching this video. It's a dogfight between the myTouch Q and the myTouch, both from T-Mobile. I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com. Let's go check it out. Okay, so here we have T-Mobile's two new myTouch devices. On the right, we have the myTouch Q with its physical QWERTY keyboard, and on the left we have the myTouch, which has no physical keyboard, so it's a virtual keyboard only. And really there's a lot of similarities between these two devices, but there's also quite a few differences that make one stand out over the other, and the question is, which one is it that stands out? Which one should you get? We'll start off with hardware. First of all, on the front here, you're going to notice that the myTouch has a slightly larger display. It's a 3.8-inch display compared to the myTouch Q, which has a 3.5-inch display. And not only does the myTouch Q have a smaller display, but the myTouch also has a more impressive display. It's an AMOLED display, and it has a higher resolution of 480 by 800. So larger display, AMOLED display, which means that the colors look great. It's very clear, but also very bright. The saturation is just excellent. The display just looks absolutely terrific. Whereas you have a smaller display, a lower resolution of 320 by 480. So it's not as impressive. Text is pixelated, and it's slightly pixelated on the myTouch as well. If you get close here, you're going to notice on that text there, it gets a little pixelated, but it's definitely more noticeable on the myTouch Q. And then also it's not as bright, the colors don't show up as well, colors are more faded. Overall, it just looks much better on the myTouch. Also, because the myTouch doesn't have a physical keyboard, it's also much slimmer. Now, obviously you can't blame this on the myTouch Q because it's naturally going to be thicker because it has a physical keyboard. But also, overall, the myTouch is a very attractive device for being a mid-range device. It has a very nice design. So you can see on the side here these kind of angled ends here on the top and on the bottom. It has a very nice balance of rounded corners, but also you can see some sharp edges here on the sides. Overall, just a very nice design. On the back we have a soft touch coating. On the front, just a glossy front panel, but just very attractive. It looks very premium for a mid-range device. It looks like it's worth more than what you're paying for it. Whereas the myTouch Q has just a basic design. It's not a bad thing because it's a design that you expect to see on a mid-range device. But just compared to the myTouch, considering they're the same price, the myTouch just looks a lot more premium. Both of them do come in two colors, but there are two different colors for each device. And so yeah, the myTouch Q, it's a little bit thicker. The myTouch Q is 0.51 inches thick, whereas the myTouch is only 0.4 inches thick. Still, the myTouch Q feels, slim for having a physical keyboard because, LG has done a great job with having some rounded tips on the myTouch Q as well. But just overall, the myTouch looks a lot better, and then having that AMOLED display also makes it look a lot better as well. Now obviously these are both Android devices. They both ship with Android 2.3 as well as LG's custom UI, so there's not a lot of differences there. I won't go do an in-depth look at LG's UI since I already did that in the review, and they're both exactly the same. There are a couple of differences that I want to point out. They actually ship with slightly different versions of the UI. Overall, it's basically the same, but you're going to notice a couple of differences. For example, if we go to messaging, you're going to notice that the color scheme is lighter on the myTouch Q, whereas on the myTouch it's darker. And then if we go to compose a message, again, lighter color scheme, darker color scheme. I'm guessing this is simply to take advantage of the myTouch's AMOLED display. Darker colors show up much better on an AMOLED display. So I'm guessing that's why LG decided to do that. So it's just slight things like that that you're going to notice throughout the UI, where it's a little bit darker on the myTouch. But overall, you know, if we go to the notification panel, you're going to notice it's exactly the same. We go to the app drawer. Again, it's exactly the same, just kind of that darker color scheme on the myTouch as opposed to myTouch Q. But overall, it's not going to make that much of a difference. Now, we'll go back to messaging, and you know, obviously the myTouch Q has a physical keyboard, so this is one area where it has a huge advantage, at least if you need a physical keyboard. You know, typing on a 3.8-inch display, it's probably going to be a little bit too small for some, unless you're coming from something like the iPhone, where you know you're pretty used to typing on a small display. But you know, of course, you can use it in landscape mode. And so it's a lot more comfortable, and I'd say probably for most people, typing in landscape mode will be the most comfortable. Let's see if we can get it to rotate. So, you know, once it's in landscape mode, it's pretty much the same size, but still, sometimes having a physical keyboard is just the best way to go. And if you need a physical keyboard, you know, obviously the myTouch Q is the obvious choice, and it is one of the best physical keyboards that I've tested. Even though the keys are pretty flat, as you can see, they have just a slight rounded design to them. They're island style keys, and then on top of that, they're very easy to press. They're not too firm at all, and so that makes it just so much easier to use, especially considering how flat the keys are. I really have no complaints about the physical keyboard on the myTouch Q. So in the area of keyboards, the myTouch Q wins because it has that physical keyboard. But again, you know, if you don't want the extra bulk and you're wondering, you know, okay, if I don't want the physical keyboard, if I don't want the extra bulk, is a myTouch okay? Yes, it is, because, you know, if it's too small, you can always use it in landscape mode, and it'll probably be just fine for everyone. So it comes with a stock Android keyboard, and then you can also use the swipe keyboard. So some people like using swipe, and of course you can also use the virtual keyboard on the myTouch Q as well as swipe. But still, you know, if you want a physical keyboard, definitely advantage to the myTouch Q. But the myTouch is fine in terms of the virtual keyboard as well. So one other small note about the UI, one little, you know, kind of minor difference. You'll notice on the these 4 capacitive buttons down here, you actually have a button for the Genius button functionality on the myTouch Q, whereas on the myTouch, you don't have that button. It's actually a shortcut in this dock. Now you can customize this dock to change these shortcuts, so if you happen to remove the Genius button shortcut, you'll have to, anytime you want to go to that, you'll have to go to the app drawer because it doesn't have a dedicated button. I'm not entirely sure why LG decided to do that. You know, it might be a hassle if you use that button a lot, but again, it's just kind of one minor thing. Also, if you notice on the myTouch Q, the micro USB port does not have a cover on it, whereas on the myTouch it does. Again, you know, if you're kind of rough on your device, it might be better to have the flap. Personally, I like not having it. It just makes it so much easier to access. But again, that's kind of one of those minor things. Another big difference is the myTouch has a front-facing camera, whereas the myTouch Q does not. So if you do a lot of video chatting, you know, it's probably going to be nice to have that front-facing camera, and then it comes with quick video chat with the app, so you can use that for video chatting. You don't get that on the myTouch Q. But again, you know, talking about cameras, the myTouch Q has a flash with its camera, whereas the myTouch does not. Now, both of these have the same camera. It's a 5-megapixel camera, autofocus, and they both capture 720p HD video. But again, you get a flash with a myTouch Q. You don't get that with a myTouch. In terms of you know, picture quality, video capture quality, you know, for an in-depth look at those features, you can watch the full review for both of these phones. In all, you know, basically they're exactly the same, because, you know, this is basically exactly the same camera, just, you know, the myTouch lacks a flash. So picture quality was identical, and then you can watch the review to see some of those sample pictures that I showed. Video capture quality was also identical, but again, you know, if you need a flash, if you take a lot of pictures, you know, in low light settings, it'd be nice to have a flash. I will say that whenever I use the flash with the myTouch Q, it kind of gave the picture sort of a greenish yellow tint to it, and so I was a little disappointed by that. But that's the camera.